Soon after Youngkin took office, he decided to lift Northam's statewide mask mandate in K-12 public schools, in order to leave it to parents' choice. Local county school boards were then faced with the decision: do they keep the mandate for their county schools, or scrap it? At a surface level glance, this seems bizarre, but Youngkin ran on this, and it has been a political issue since the beginning of the pandemic. And that conflict has yet to die, as proven when school boards began organizing their special emergency meetings to discuss this issue. Meetings which are, of course, open to the public.
We've heard the word retarded before. Retarded has another meaning, too, and has another meaning. It means slow to learn.
I mean, come on. After hearing that, I had to do something. So, hey, let's do like December of 91, and let's crush this red menace.
The masks most of these children are wearing offer no protection against this virus. I've spoken to numerous doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, pulmonologists, and physicians at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. The droplets of the COVID-19 virus are microscopic. These masks simply offer protection against large droplets, and there's no data proving that these masks work.
Okay. This came up a few times, and it is something I've heard before, about how the masks in general are ineffective and or that cloth masks don't work. Well, first things first. Do masks work? Yes. Alright, so the claim here is that particles escape from the mask and still affect others, therefore we should scrap masks because they're annoying and let parents choose. Yeah. Okay. So now, from my research, it does seem partially true that the particles do escape from the mask. And as shown from this Fox News thing and from the article it's drawing from, some droplets actually escape the masks, and the article does point that out. However, unmasked individuals spread significantly more particles than masked ones, as most of them get trapped by the mask, while the rest travel at a much reduced distance. That's why we had social distancing of 6 feet and masks as the standard recommendation for so long. That was the reason. And, we know this because when these practices were put in place, and as this study points out in Germany, new infections fell by 45%. And the general consensus I can find anywhere I look on masks is that they should be worn, and they do significantly reduce the spread of COVID-19. Now, of course, there is a gradient of masks, with the KN95s and N95s at the top, then surgical masks, and then cloth masks at the bottom.
But didn't the CDC on January 14th, this last week, just acknowledge that after 2 years of being in this pandemic, that cotton masks, what the children wear in school, are ineffective against COVID-19?
Damn, I had no idea. Well, okay, let's just check what the CDC said. It can't hurt to get a second opinion. Oh, well that was fast. Okay, the CDC has stated what is consistent with everything else I found. Cloth masks are not ineffective against COVID, but surgical masks and N95s are better. Now there is a caveat, as there are not a ton of real-world studying comparing groups, as all of the models suggested cloth masks were less effective, so any kind of comparison kind of runs to an ethical issue if someone died from your experiment who could have not caught COVID. But from this Bloomberg Bangladesh study I found, cloth masks still work to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
The only logical choice here is to give the parents the freedom to choose. If your child wears the mask, then they're already protected. By your standards, why worry if others are not?
As those who want to mask, that's your prerogative. If that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to do for your family, then go ahead and do so.
Now I'm sorting through arguments by degree of relevance and importance. That's why I put this argument near the front. Why care if someone else is not wearing a mask? Okay, there is no other way to put it. These people do not understand how masks work, or they just cannot follow lines of logic. So, remember the study? Okay, I cannot fathom how you could think that this is a problem with masks, not stopping all particles, and then go on to not understand the importance of this implication. To simplify, you wear a mask to protect yourself and others. If you're sick and you wear a mask, you're preventing your disease droplets from your nose and your mouth from reaching others. And remember, some people are asymptomatic, and most people are able to spread COVID before symptoms show up, which is why it is necessary to wear a mask at all times, so you're not unknowingly infecting others. Now, if masks only protected yourself, then sure, I could see the argument of freedom and liberty and right to choose and whatnot, but that is simply not the case. Therefore, taking this mandate away would increase infections for people who don't wear masks and increase the risk for those who continue to wear masks. Now, I'm a student, so I've seen how a select group of individuals, which is larger than I'd like to see, who wear their mask incorrectly. The dick nosers. Now, I have to specify then, when I talk about the benefits of wearing a mask, I'm talking about the benefits of wearing a mask over your nose, as not doing that is the equivalent of not wearing your mask at all.
While I do not doubt the severity of this virus, I also do not doubt that immune systems are all different. Illnesses do not affect all people the same way.
She is right. They're called immunocompromised people, and they cannot receive the vaccine for whatever reason, and they're far more likely to die from COVID. Like an example would be someone suffering from AIDS. That's why you wear a mask, to protect those people. Wait. Oh, yeah, they don't understand that. Or they just don't care that they're getting those people killed. My bad. My mistake.
Cutting off sufficient airflow.
And are overall cutting off O2 levels.
Well, I gotta say, they got me. I guess they do reduce oxygen levels. I mean, June 8th of 2020, we had really good knowledge of COVID. And of course, every self-respecting site offers an entire pharmacy worth of dick and metal pills. And of course, there are miraculous COVID treaters here too. Why not? How could the hospitals have possibly missed that? Now let's look at some other sources. Hey, Fox. Okay, normally I don't really like Fox, but when I say that, I mean I kind of strongly hate their pundits, like Tucker, but hey, he'll have to wait for his own video. As for the reporting, I gotta admit, it's mostly pretty good, even though their comments don't really reflect that ever. Oh well. Regardless, these claims about this oxygen don't seem to be based in reality, with one exception. N95s are named for their ability to filter out 95% of particles, and it does seem that if you wear one for an extended period of time, you could start feeling oxygen deprivation and dizziness. And, I mean, yeah, that is quite unfortunate. I haven't seen any evidence that's like some long-term or serious damage, especially if you're already healthy. But, yeah, N95s do seem to actually do that. But N95s are the exception, okay? And surgical masks and cloth masks do not give oxygen deprivation. Now, I can't find anything on that does say that. Even the United Church of Christ says no. Which is interesting, because these same people here claimed earlier that
after 2 years of being in this pandemic, that cotton masks, what the children wear in school, are ineffective against COVID-19. And that only if worn properly, N95 masks are the most effective. Well, we all know that the children, number one, do not have access to the N95 masks.
And that they constrict oxygen. But only N95s do that, which they stated that the kids don't wear, which means that they are either deliberately lying, or that they are product of an absurd degree of deception or ignorance. But we'll get to that theory later. But hey, if you still don't believe me, how come these masks are so dangerous and impair your mental capabilities, yet have been worn by surgeons and nurses for ages?
So if we say, every time that there's a new one, not only do we mess up our heart rates, but we mess up our children's psyches.
I've listened to the parents across this Commonwealth, children who have speech impediments. They're having issues with their emotions, their psychosis, all different issues that some of these children are having. You have people that are committing suicide, but you don't hear that on the news.
Number 4, they delay language development.
For now, I will look at the impact of masks on kids. Well then, would you be surprised at all to learn that I couldn't find anything as doomer as these claims? I initially thought there was going to be a lot, but it seems that it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Children seem to glean emotion mostly based on the eyes, which remain exposed, so unaffected by masks. Probably the best comparison that can help you understand why this isn't really that big of a problem is the multiple cultures where masks and facial coverings are more common, and these issues don't really appear to manifest. If you're struggling to think of examples, well, there's kind of Eastern Asia, specifically Japan, Korea, and China, where this has been a commonplace practice for decades at this point. Now, I do want to present the opportunity that I could be wrong here, but even in those dissenting opinions, they just think that face shields should be used instead. Now here comes the least surprising plot twist in history. None of these people in these meetings, or anyone I have ever met, actually wants to use face shields instead of using masks. They just want no covering, which I kind of already demonstrated to be harmful. So I guess they're just not listening to any experts on this.
These masks also have caused issues such as headaches, sleepiness.
Now, for the general population of students, what about acne, headaches, or psychological effects? Yeah, masks cause acne. That does seem to be the case, and there are maybe some ways to mitigate it, certain kinds of creams or whatever, but yeah, that does suck. So what about headaches? Well, it does seem, from these studies I could find, that masks can increase the frequency of headaches for those who are prone to them. So these anti-maskers get 1 point if the next sentence did not say that any possible negative effects are completely outweighed by the increased chances of not getting COVID. Well, I mean, to be fair, I did find another source from .org, the American Institute for Economic Research, who gave their own statement about COVID. This is not surprising, given that masks have become dogma, a visible symbol of compliance and fealty to the medical/political agenda that elevates the coronavirus above all else. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like neutral reporting to me. But those damned liberal fact-checkers have placed them as untrustworthy due to disinformation on COVID. I mean, going through studies, I found another source that was deemed highly reliable that showed a study where participants who wore the mask more often were more happy. Okay, so what's my point? Take a step back and think about all these claims. We live in a time where I don't know how many Americans there are left, if there are any, who don't know someone who has died of COVID at this point. There have been over 850,000 deaths as the official count. My point being, I don't find feelings of isolation or depression or anxiety a massive surprise that masks must be the only cause of. Seems like there's plenty of other reasons for that to have come about.
Increasing the humidity that you are breathing and rebreathing, this has nothing to do with CO2. This has to do with moisture. It affects your respiratory system.
Number 3, the kids' masks also collect bacteria and parasites, has been said before earlier by speakers.
I just wanted to briefly mention this. I did find that masks can get dirty and all that, but as long as you wash them with their cloth or leave them in a hot car or just get a new one and not wear the same one every day, this really isn't an issue.
About viral variants, they get weaker. Every single iteration, they get weaker. They don't get stronger. Masks are not the answer when something is getting so weak that it's over in a couple of days.
Now, this was an interesting take, and one that actually appears to have some truth behind it. A virus that knocks its host dead, after all, will not spread to others. So a host who survives with the virus is going to have a weaker form of it, but if it spreads, then that's the one that's going to actually start spreading around. But if you remember that death chart earlier, there was something quite interesting going on that I want to look at. The Delta variant was a major exception to this idea of a weaker virus. I mean, at least 400,000 Indians died due to Delta, yet some experts believe that number to be far too low. And of course, when we look here in the USA at this data, we can see that Delta was quite the killer as well, and was not really lowering that death rate at all, even reaching original outbreak levels of death. But this death rate has remained consistent, and if you look at the new cases, that would not make sense at all, except of course that's Omicron. But hey, okay, so Omicron's doing all of this infection. I mean, what, like 1 million cases a day, but the death rate's consistent? Okay, so that's maybe her theory actually has weight. Maybe we should scrap the masks after all. Fortunately, a scientist also attended this meeting, and he explained what these results meant.
The first is why Omicron's different. And as a health system, we've certainly experienced this, and we created a little graphic here to help understand. You hear on the radio, you hear people talk, it's twice as contagious and half as lethal. And you think intuitively, oh, it cancels itself out. It's the same. But it's not. So we created a little schematic here. If you start with 100 people, and they give it to 3 people, and you go through a few cycles, 100 to 300, 900, up after 5 cycles, you get to 8,100 people. And let's say 4% of those people go to the hospital, that's 324 people in the hospital. But if one person gives it to 6 people, 100 goes to 600. 600 goes to 3,600. Those same 5 cycles take you to 130,000 people and 2,600 hospitalizations. And what we've experienced at Valley Health, and I'm going to come to our actual numbers in a moment, is exactly that. We've seen this incredibly rapid spike.
Honestly, this guy gave a pretty good presentation, and he seemed really knowledgeable on the issues. And hey, this was actually kind of eye-opening. It explained a thing that I didn't really totally understand, but then after going through it, oh yeah, no, that made sense. So how did the audience react to this paragon of knowledge?
There's two.
If we could get the door to where we can hear the speaker here.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. I know this is a difficult time, and it's easy to understand why people are frustrated. We've been doing this for 2 years, and I think everybody's a little bit tired.
Enough of the scientists. Let's get back to the real intellectuals.
My career is in data analytics, and I've spent a lot of time studying statistics, so my friends and family often look to me for that kind of an argument. If you look at the Q-COVID risk tool that the University of Oxford developed, which lets you put in your personal, not identifiable information, but personal characteristics, and it spits out a risk score for you of being hospitalized or dying of COVID, doesn't allow child ages. I ran it for a 19-year-old healthy male of healthy weight without pre-existing conditions, and came back with a probability that was literally 1 in 1 million.
Now, this is important, and this is actually a monumental occasion because one of these people actually cited something. Okay, so if we go in and we look up, yes, the Q-COVID risk factor thing actually is real. And if we actually go to the statistics, he is right. I mean, there really has hardly been any 0 to 17-year-old deaths. I mean, 727? That was way less than I even thought it was. But if we do also look at this, you can see that the amount of deaths increases really high as you get older and older and older. My point being, his family and people he knows might go to him for data analysis, but I hope they don't go to him for logic because there is none here. The concern is not that, oh, the kids are going to die, or at least that's not my concern. My concern is that the kids are going to go home after getting infected with COVID, and then they're going to infect their grandparents or parents, and then they're going to die. I just don't know if this was never considered, but that's the issue.
The CDC guidelines change daily at this rate.
Every second opinion has been silenced in social media, and it's interesting.
It would be helpful to have an authoritative source for Americans that reliably summarizes the relevant evidence in a timely fashion. In this case and others, the CDC is effectively telling people to look elsewhere.
So now it is time to dive into some good old-fashioned conspiracy theories and see where they lead. So in order to do that, let's go back to where this hesitancy all began. So as you may or may not know, Dr. Fauci and the CDC early on talked about how people should not be buying masks as supply was limited. Gradually, they started encouraging more mask usage and higher quality masks as time went on. A decision Fauci received a lot of flack for, but one which he still insists that was necessary as that equipment was desperately needed for frontline medical staff. Now, disagreement on this is something I can completely understand. It is quite the moral conundrum. But at the same time, those nurses and doctors desperately needed that equipment and were constantly being exposed to COVID while working. So it is one that I kind of agree with, but it is quite tricky. It's also one that some experts still believe to be happening with the CDC only suggesting N95s, which are the most self-protective mask, in order to ensure that medical professionals still have a steady supply of them. And of course, who could possibly think that there's just a teeny tiny possibility that maybe more information has been coming out as we understand this virus, which will then change CDC regulations and guidelines, which is absolutely what's happening. Anyways, all of this is just a teeny tiny bit more nuanced than from here, this source here, who are stating what the crowd, or what the people in the crowd were just stating, that apparently the CDC has been clowns and been flopping all over this issue. RT. That is a familiar name. Why do I... Oh yeah, RT is Russian state media, and as we all know, state media is wonderful, especially from a democratic country like Russia, where opposition members don't conveniently die all the time, and where human and women's rights are doing fantastic. Am I saying that these people in the crowd have been fed propaganda? I guess so. Any of these counter sources have seemed just a teeny tiny bit unreliable to me, or not exactly honest.
SB 1303 that has been referenced has been used against our children and against its intent this school year to advance an agenda. And I know that Mr. Perry in a previous meeting had mentioned $50,000 that Dr. Suvine was getting an addition, and we've questioned where that money's come from, and I just really question whether that money is tied to SB 1303.
I feel like I kind of have to give this a brief mention because I tried to look up and find out what this was. I literally have no idea. I couldn't find anything.
A study by Principia Scientific International involving 25,000 school-aged children shows that masks are harming children physically, psychologically, and behaviorally, revealing 24 distinct health issues with wearing masks. The health issues and impairments observed in this study were found to affect 68% of masked children who are forced to wear face coverings for an average of 4.5 hours a day. The study also includes 17,854 health complaints submitted by parents.
Now this is a really interesting claim, and one that I cannot let slide, no matter how tired I was. So I tried to verify this claim and look at the study. So when I looked up their website, and okay, just because the first recommended search autocomplete is biased, okay, look, that doesn't mean anything. So I looked it up, and I found the first recommended thing is another study that reviewed other studies and could not find any harmful effect on gas exchange with masks for children. But whatever, if we scroll down, we see this. An article that says that masks should not be worn by children. Oh, and when you go in and look, it says the sample size is 20 girls and 25 boys. Now you can really conclude a lot based on that. I mean, it's not like it's minuscule, and trying to make any kind of overall claims that children should not wear masks because of that is kind of ridiculous, considering if a single girl had a pre-existing condition, then 5% of the data on girls could be worthless. Oh, but they cited another larger article, so let's take a look at that. Do you see that glaring box like a stop sign that states that this study cannot be used to conclude a link between masks and adverse effects on children? And at the top, it states that this article is a preprint. Why the fuck would any article ever cite this? But to completely be honest and open, let's try to see the full story. So I delved into that original paper, exhaustion be damned. And it was retracted. So that was a fun journey that had nothing to do with Principia, except that it studied the exact same thing that this claim study was said to investigate, except that this claim study that this guy was citing was 25,000 kids to draw from. You could really find a lot of data with that. Except I couldn't find it through a Google search, which I thought was kind of odd. So I decided to go on their website. It's literally a wall of anti-vax and anti-mask articles. Very cool. Some of which are kind of hilariously absurd, as the easiest counter is to look up hospitalization rates of vaccinated versus unvaccinated people. But again, I'm off topic. This guy in the meeting claimed that this was a study published by Principia. So I went through their publications, and lo and behold, there is nothing there. Not a single study on COVID. It is all just climate change denial. Now, I don't have time to go down that rabbit hole and try and see how you can disagree with 97% of scientists, so let's reel this back in. I tried looking everything specific up that I could find on this study, and it just doesn't seem to exist. Or maybe it did, but just like that tiny study, or the preprint it cited, it was retracted or buried. So all of these scary statistics that this guy brings up, they mean nothing. I'm completely exhausted. These arguments should be falling apart this fast at a Google search. Oh, and remember that bias search suggestion? Oh, who could have possibly foreseen that this website would be getting this rating?
Fellow citizens used. And this stat is about suicides. In 2019, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death for all ages in the United States. However, for the ages from 10 to 34, it's the second leading cause of death. We are causing our kids to fear, to have mental issues, health issues, and this has got to stop.
Damn, I had no idea that the people that committed suicide in their school were doing it because of masks. That's crazy. Damn, I guess someone should have informed all those people in the school systems. Ah, well, especially considering he gave absolutely no citation that it was the masks that were causing these suicides. But why would you expect stats from someone wearing a Let's Go Brandon shirt? The epitome of bravery and intelligence right there.
And these masks are being mandated because of money. So
It does show here how Chinese companies have profited. So I guess all my earlier research on masks working is fake, as this has completely blown me out of the water. I mean, it also does state that American production picked up, but we don't have to worry about that. Okay, please, tell me what is more likely. That the Chinese bought out some school board in rural Virginia, and that masks don't work at all, and that the CDC are Chinese puppets without any evidence, or that maybe, just maybe, this is nothing. Alright, now it is nearly 1 a.m. and I do have school tomorrow, so let's please move on to some more fun times before I just wrap this all up.
If you put these masks on and go out on a cold day and breathe through the mask, you can still see your own breath coming out of the sides.
Now, this is the greatest point against masks that there possibly is that we've seen tonight, or it really has been. You know, when I go up to walk and talk to someone, I typically don't face them because, you know, why would you do that when you could instead form a perfect perpendicular thing so that the viruses going out the side of your mask actually can, like, infect them so that you don't have to deal with them later. That's actually exactly how I talk to everyone.
Within that fluid, you had bacteria growing. And it was the bacteria that produces a poison, as all bacteria do, a good strong dose of zinc if we can get it into the cells. And getting it into the cells is something that quinine does quite well. Hydroxychloroquine is a stabilized quinine, but we're not allowed to use that.
Hydroxychloroquine. Okay. Well, I mean, early on, it seemed like maybe it could have been something. And looking through some of these older studies, it seems that some thought that maybe there was a bit of benefit. But going through now, and especially through the gigantic recovery study, it kind of has been determined that there is no clinical benefit for the use of hydroxychloroquine. It's kind of just been revoked as something taken seriously, as it doesn't seem to actually help, especially against severe COVID. So there goes that.
If you think you can vote yourself out of laws and executive orders, what are you going to vote on next? Maybe you'll vote to allow these kids to smoke ciggies as a treat during break time, too.
After being confronted with the epitome of human intelligence and reason, you might actually be surprised at what the ruling of this was.
I'll vote, Ms. White.
I vote in favor of Mr. Hester's motion.
Mrs. Martin.
No.
Mr. Comstock.
Yes.
Mr. Hester.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
No.
Mr. Lake.
Yes.
And the chair votes no. The motion carries.
They voted in favor of the mandate. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so what was the point of ever making this video? Why would you stay up so late? What's wrong with you? And honestly, I consider these questions myself. They're actually very valid. But the answer to that is that I was finally able to get a good glimpse at this because I watched this live. And now, by going through and spending an entire day doing this, I finally can counter this stuff. It's amazing. Either these people all just repeated themselves, or just what they were saying was just inaccurate. Every single one of them. That's astounding. And you gotta recognize that some of these people are a little bit more important than they may at first appear.
For those of you who don't know me, I am the husband of your new lieutenant.
What you saw there, these are all Youngkin's people. These are Youngkin supporters. And I guess I was duped into believing that he was more moderate than he was. What the fuck was this shit?